Greetings, we are in Senior English B, and our objective now for the hour is to pay some small amount of time and attention to Matthew Arnold's classic poem, Dover Beach, on page 1042. Now my assumption, I've got a couple of them already. One, I'm assuming that you've already looked at the information on 1040. If you haven't, you might want to scan it real quickly. Notice that there's some literary analysis stuff that you've already written down. Notice the reading strategy that I'm going to suggest that you employ while we work through this poem. And finally, notice that there's some vocabulary that you can pretty much be guaranteed is going to end up on the exam. So you want to pay attention to that. Two, I'm working off of the assumption that you read a little bit about our cat, Matthew Arnold. Yes, those are sideboards, or sideburns as they're sometimes called. That large amount of hair, it's a kind of strange facial configuration that men of his day used, right? This was not unusual. Matthew Arnold will now be our focus, okay? Now, to understand the poem Dover Beach, there are several things that one needs to know in advance. Let's jot them down. One, Matthew Arnold is a great critic. So you want that word in your notes. Matthew Arnold is a great critic of his time and place, of his culture. He will be labeled often conservative in his orientation. He sees that something is sadly missing from England society. Back to our shoe factory story. Okay? You'll remember, the loss of the job means the loss of a certain kind of life. But for Arnold, the loss of a job means something far more profound. Loss of something else. We'll look at it when we see this poem. Okay? That's what you need to know about Arnold. Two, you need to know about geography, and just a bit of it. Okay? You're now looking with me at the picture on 1042. If you don't understand what you're looking at in that picture, much of this poem is lost to you. Okay? England is a small rock. You can get around it pretty quickly. You can drive across it in a matter of hours. If you go all the way to the eastern side of that rock, you will find there some very famous cliffs. Okay? Those cliffs are famous, and you're looking at them right now on page 1042. Those cliffs are famous for a couple of things. One, the rock is very white rock. It almost looks like chalk. Okay? And it's a very beautiful kind of cliff. It rises hundreds of feet into the air. You can see that. And then at the very top of the cliff, believe it or not, beautiful grass right up to the edge. Lovely grass right up to the edge. These cliffs are known as the Cliffs of Dover. And the beach itself is called Dover Beach. Interestingly, two things about this place in English history. One, it's the #1 spot where people go to commit suicide. Makes sense. Dude, you fall off this cliff, you ain't coming back. Do you got me? So lots and lots of people. We know, for example, in the famous play King Lear by Shakespeare, that the old man Gloucester will actually go there to commit suicide, to take his life. It was apparently what was done. You go to the Cliffs of Dover and you take your leap. Not unlike, for example, maybe the Golden Gate Bridge outside San Francisco, which unfortunately often has been the place where people go to take their life, okay? Because you don't come back if you fall off that bridge, right, so high. Number two, not only is it a place for suicide, are you ready for this? And some of you will laugh at this one as you even write it into your notes. Dover Beach, at the top up there, boasted over the course of England's history, many times, little huts, houses, little cabins, where lots and lots of honeymooners came after they got married. Right? So Dover Beach was a place where people could come after they got married and celebrate their honeymoon. But it was also the place where you could, I suppose, jump off if things didn't go well. See how this works? Okay? Now, The other thing we should point out about this topography is that across directly to the east is a body of water. You can see the water there. And if you keep going to the east, you will run into the French coast. For those of you, of course, know your World War II history, maybe you know those first opening minutes of Saving Private Ryan. You know all about the body of water that we will refer to as the English Channel. On a very clear evening, people who stand on Dover Beach at the top on the cliffs can actually see the lights across the channel, the English Channel, that body of water, can actually see the lights of France and vice versa. Got me? In other words, it's relatively close, but it's ocean. All right? Finally, the last thing you need to know has something to do with beaches. This poem isn't going to make a lot of sense to you if you don't know about beaches. Now, I realize I'm lecturing in the middle of the Bighorn Mountains, and I often lecture to students who've never even seen a beach, and so I have to make some observations. Some of you have maybe been to beaches before. Maybe you hopped a plane and went, for example, out west to Hawaii or something like that. So, for example, if you spent any time in Maui or, for example, at Diamond Head, you saw a certain kind of beach. There are two kinds of beaches for your notes. Okay? There's not just one, although most of you, if you've ever been to a beach, will have been to this first kind of beach, and that is a sandy beach. Okay? The beach is made of sand. All right? So, for example, if you've spent time off of, the very popular resort beaches, you've seen the yellow or the even white sand. For those of you that have ever been, for example, to Destin in Florida, the beautiful white beaches, that's sandy beach. Okay, that's the first kind of beach. The second kind of beach is one that's maybe not so well known to you, and yet actually is probably a far more popular beach around the oceans of the world, and that is a rocky beach. A rocky beach. That is to say, there is rock, not sand. Oftentimes this has to do with formulations in regards to volcanoes and the like, okay? A rocky beach, all right? Now, what's the difference? Very important for your notes. Huge to understanding this poem. The difference is, when you have a sandy beach and the waves hit the sand, it makes a certain kind of beautiful, muffled sound. It's hypnotic. It can actually put you to sleep. I don't know if you've ever been next to a beach like this, but it's really, really cool. It has a sound that's quite beautiful. However, and this is where you want to go for your notes, a rocky beach has a completely different sound. The water will in fact put those rocks together, will rub them together, and the sound is not a pleasing sound at all. It is a grating sound, a harsh sound. It's the sound of rock rubbing on rock. Okay? Now, having said that, I can say this. The beach at the bottom of the cliffs of Dover is a rocky beach, not a sandy beach. Okay? Rocky beach. And as the rock moves when the waves hit that beach, the echoes reverberate up the cliffs of Dover and make some really strange, eerie, and haunting sounds at the top of those cliffs. And obviously at the bottom as well. All right? So as we begin now to study our poem Dover Beach, you have to take into consideration all the things I just said that you have written down in your notes. Let's now turn to the poem itself. We've got about a half an hour now to get through this poem. I'm going to do two things with you. One, I'm going to read it. We're just going to read it out loud. Two, we're going to come back and begin to exegete both at level 2 and obviously level 3. Let's go ahead now and turn to the poem itself. You are on 1042. The title of the poem is Dover Beach. Read it with me now. We'll read it together, and then we'll come back to take a look at this, what some will argue should be a love poem. But they're not altogether by the end of the poem sure that it is a love poem. Let's take a look. Dover Beach. The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window, sweet as the night air. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land, listen. You hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling at the return up the high strand. begin and cease, and then again begin, with tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Sophocles, long ago, heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind down the vast edges, drear and naked shingles of the world. Ah, love, let us be true to one another. For the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. Now the first place we're going to begin is at 2b, rhetoric. Not what the poem says, but how the poem says it. And we want to write down, we are reading another Victorian writer, and I told you in advance, these Victorian poets love to use the dramatic monologue. So let's write it down at 2b. We are looking at another dramatic monologue, and to that degree, we could make a comparative analysis right there at 3a. There were other dramatic monologues that we saw. Of course, probably the fast one that comes to mind is the lunatic that strangled his girl, right? What was the name of that poem? Porphyra's Lover. You'll also remember that Browning had that other offering, My Last Duchess. You'll also remember that Tennyson's Ulysses is also a dramatic monologue. Jot down again, what are the two things we're always looking for when we come upon one of these dramatic monologues? Do you remember? One, we're always asking the question, who is the speaker of the poem? Two, who is the speaker speaking to? What is the dramatic quality? Sometimes that's fairly easy to figure out. We think of Last Duchess. Sometimes who the speaker's speaking to, yeah, we're not so clear in Porphyra's Lover. Is he talking to you? Is he talking to a criminal investigator? Who is it that he's speaking to as he says, God hasn't said a word about the fact that I strangled my would-be girlfriend to death and now I'm sitting with her next to me all night long. See, it's a question of who is it that we're speaking to. We're going to come now to Dover Beach and we're going to identify this as a dramatic monologue. Number two, we definitely want to pay attention to the number of stanzas. In fact, it's not a bad idea to write that number at level 1, skip a couple of lines, and about each stanza be able to reduce to 1 or 2 lines. If you can do this, then you'll be able to say what you think the entire poem is about, right? So let's now take a look at stanza 1. We open. The sea is calm tonight. What sea? What sea? What sea are we talking about? Well, right, we're talking about that English Channel, right, that's sitting right there at the bottom of these cliffs. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window. Sweet is the night air. Exclamation point. Okay? Put it in your own words. Simple. First of all, there is a speaker in this poem. And the speaker says something about the evening. What does he say, first of all, about the sea? What do the opening lines say? We have interesting words here. Notice what they are. Calm, tranquil, right? Across the English Channel on the French coast, he says, you can see the lights of France. The bay is tranquil. What does the word tranquil mean to you? What's that word mean to you? Tranquil means what? Peaceful, calm. Finally, the last line of the first stanza says what? Come to the window, sweet is the night air. Whoa, 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 now wait a minute. Let's just assume for a moment that the speaker is a guy. And let's just assume for a moment that the speaker, a guy, is standing someplace where there's a window. Can you take a guess maybe where it is? One of those little huts at the top of the meadows, right? Who might he be speaking to? And what geographically do you understand if he has to say to her, come to the window? Do you understand my question? Say it out loud, Brian. How about it? If he has to say, come to the window, then where is his girl?
Not by the window.
Clearly not by the window. Write this down. This is huge. Clearly not by the window. What is it that goes on then, Mr. Hernandez, in the opening stanza? Hey, girlfriend, it's beautiful outside. Everything is great. Come over to the window and see. Which means what? In regards to the two people, speaker and listener, are they together? They're not together. That's why he has to say to her, come over to the window. They are separated in some way. He's standing next to the window. He says, girlfriend, it's beautiful outside. Come over to the window. Stanza break. Let's go to the next stanza. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land, listen. You hear the grating roar of pebbles, which the waves draw back and fling at the return up the high strand. Strand means beach. Begin and cease, and then again begin with tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. All right, go ahead, write down. What is it that he says? In the first stanza he says, hey, girlfriend, it's beautiful outside. Come over to the window and take a look and listen. What's he say in the second stanza, though? What is it that he does not like? He doesn't like what? He doesn't like a certain sound. What sound? The sound of the rocks that are grating. What does the word grating mean to you? We even call a cheese grater that instrument that has those little holes that tear up the cheese, right? Grating, then, pleasant sound, not so pleasant sound. What do you think? Stanza 2. Hey, girlfriend, it's beautiful outside. Stanza 1. Come over and take a look. Stanza 2. Well, it's beautiful except for that sound. That sound, last line, brings the eternal note of sadness in. Now, this is an interesting love poem. Hey, girlfriend, come over to the window. It's really beautiful outside. Well, with the exception of that disgusting sound. That sound makes me sad. Stanza 3. Now, stanza 3 will immediately take us to 3a. Texts, we are relating to other texts. Arnold assumes that you know somebody's name. That name is not Socrates. Are you looking at it with me on page 1043, top of the page? That name is not Socrates, it is Sophocles. Okay? Now, who is Sophocles? See, we're writing this down at 3a. We're writing down the name, and then we're going to write down, who is Sophocles? Well, first of all, we're going to put him in what culture? He's a playwright from what culture? He's Greek. He's Greek. Of course, so was Socrates. Socrates, however, was the great philosopher. Sophocles, the great playwright. He wrote a famous 3 plays. We call it a trilogy. Oedipus Rex, Oedipus at Colonus, and finally, Antigone. Are you familiar with this cat's playwriting abilities? He will begin, for example, in Oedipus Rex with a story about a guy who is born on a stormy night. His father and mother, the king of a city called Thebes, is told, this kid's going to grow up, he's going to kill his father and marry his mother and have children by her. The father says, what? That is gross. I'm not going to do that. But he can't kill his own son. So he leaves his son out on the mountains, abandons him to die. The kid doesn't die. He's found by a shepherd, raised in another town. At the age of 18, he's stunningly good looking. At a party, he bumps into an old blind prophet who jerks away and says, ooh, you're cursed. Kid's like, what are you talking about? I can get a girl I want. He's like, no, you're gonna kill your dad and marry your mom. He's like, what are you talking about? And the guy says, oh no, it gets worse than that. You're gonna have kids with her too. He's like, I ain't doing it. He runs away at nighttime from who he thinks are his parents. They never told him he was a foundling. Out on the crossroads, he meets an old man who is riding in a chariot. The old man says, get out of the road. The young kid says, yours, I was here first. He and the old man have a fight. He ends up killing the old man. Doesn't realize that the old man is Laius, king of Thebes, his father. He walks down a few more steps, miles down the road. There's this large monster at the crossroads who's been putting a plague on the city of Thebes by asking a famous riddle. Nobody can answer the riddle. He throws the riddle at Oedipus. What animal walks on 4 legs in the morning, on 2 legs at noon, on 3 legs in the evening? Oedipus immediately, because he attended English class and paid attention in his annotations realizes that we're talking about metaphor, and he says immediately, you're speaking about a human being. Metaphorically speaking, when the child is in the morning of his or her life, crawls on all fours, in the noontime of life, walks on 2 legs, but in the evening of life, when I get to be an old fart, have to use a cane, 3 legs. And the Sphinx says, whoa, you're a smart cat, and he leaves. From outside of Thebes comes the city of people, and they are relieved that the plague has now been all taken care of. The queen, beautiful woman Jacusta, has just learned that her husband is dead. She needs to replace the king. She sees the beautiful young man. Oedipus is figuring he's having a great day when she invites him to become king and, of course, marry her. Which he does. But here's the thing. This ain't a story about a cat that wakes up one morning and says, I think today I'm going to kill my old man, marry my mom. That is not this play. If that was this play, we would look at Oedipus and go, ugh. That's not how we look at Oedipus. We don't look at Oedipus and go, ugh. We look at Oedipus and go, oh, man. It would be kind of like you going away to college and you meet this drop-dead gorgeous person, and you guys even finish each other's sentences and stuff. It's like incredible. Everything is awesome. You decide to get married. You have 4 children. Life is going great. When you get an email that says, strange but good news. At your birth, there was a twin. You were separated at birth. Now, hello. The only reason why I would tell a story like this and any of you would go, ugh, and not, oh, that would be awesome, is because you know this story of Oedipus, right? Where all of a sudden you start doing a little bit of research. Yeah, come to find out you both share the same birthdays and the same birthplace. And see how that works? In other words, oh wait, I'm not finished. Of course, poor Oedipus, when he discovers he's killed his dad and married his mom, and that happens at the end of the play, when the shepherd comes, when a messenger comes on and says, hey, 2 things. One, you were a foundling. The people who raised you were not your parents. And secondly, a witness watched him kill the king at the crossroads. And he says, oh, you're the guy. You're the one who killed the king. And in that moment, Oedipus realizes that, of course, his mother, Jacusta, his wife mother's left. She's gone and hung herself. Oedipus will go into the bedroom to see his wife mother dead. He will take the brooch pins that she wears in her dress. He will take them out. They have long, pokey things at the back. He will shove them into his eyes. He will blind himself. Are you ready for this? At the moment Oedipus sees, he goes blind. Get it? Right? He comes out onto the stage a broken man. Oedipus has 4 kids. 2 sons, 2 daughters. His 2 boys immediately go off to fight against each other to see who actually should become king next. His 2 daughters, Ismene runs away at fear. The only one left is a beautiful daughter named Antigone, who will stand by her father and will lead him off stage, a complete and broken man. But Sophocles is only getting started. He will end his trilogies with the famous play Antigone, where, again, the 2 sons will have fought. One of them, Eteocles, fights for the present king of Thebes. His name is Creon, and therefore is given a proper burial. His brother, Polynices, however, we're told his body will lie out in the wilderness and will be eaten by the jackals and the hyenas. He is not allowed to be buried. Whoever buries him will die of stoning. Antigone goes and buries the body of her brother out of honor to her brother. She is caught. She is brought in front of the king of Thebes, Creon, and Creon will will her to death. Only one problem. Creon's boy, Haemon, and Antigone are a thing. Yes. And so now you've got this problem. And in fact, son Haemon tries to talk to his daddy and says to him, this is like the stupidest thing you could ever do. Listen to me. Creon, the father, says, there's plenty of fields to plow. Go find another girl. Haemon says, if you do this, you will never see me again. And he leaves. The old blind Tiresias shows up and says to Creon, 2 things. 1, you're an idiot. 2, you're an idiot. You better take care of this now. After some talk, Creon decides you're right. Ironically, he goes to bury the body of Polynices first. Then he goes to the cave where he has put Antigone. with a little bit of food and water, so she starved to death slowly, as opposed to stoning her to death. That must have been compassion. And when he gets there, the stone has been moved away. The howling inside is of his own son. When Haman showed up, Antigone had already hung herself. Haman, standing next to the dead corpse, there it is, of his lover. He sees his father. He tries to kill his dad. Talk about your dysfunctional family, right? And then when he can't do it, he falls on his own sword. Back at the end of the play, Creon's wife has heard that her son has committed suicide. She kills herself committing suicide. And the body of Haman is brought on stage with Creon now, a complete and broken man and king. And he will leave the stage himself, it appears, maybe to go off to take his own life. That is Sophocles. Jot down what you know already about Sophocles then before we get into the third stanza of this poem. What do you know? Boy, he writes some real page-turners, hey-ho, happy kinds of stuff. No, not so much. Right? Sophocles is the great poet of human misery. He will write about life sucks and then you die. Hey, girlfriend, come over to the window. It's beautiful outside. Stanza 2. Well, with the exception of that sound that's coming up from the beach, I don't like that sound very much. Stanza 3. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean. That's the ocean next to the Mediterranean Sea where the Greeks lived. And it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound of thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. Follow it. All of a sudden, this poem increasingly starts to look less and less like a love poem. Hey, girlfriend, it's beautiful outside. Come over to the window. Well, except for that wretched sound of those rocks that are grating down at the bottom. Reminds me of that playwright Sophocles who wrote all those sad plays about human misery. I'm made to think that life is kind of like miserable too. Fourth stanza. We're finally going to figure out what Arnold believes is wrong with England now. That is to say, roughly 1850, all right? Look what he says, stanza 4. The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind, drawn down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Do you notice that the words sea of faith are capitalized? That's important. The speaker of our poem will say, there was a time when the sea of faith was like a girdle, a protector. In old school language, football players wore what was called a girdle. They don't call it this anymore because guys don't like to hear the word girdle because they think it's something women wear around their midsection to hold everything in. But that's exactly what football players wore as well. Girdle simply means protection, something that hedges us in, takes care of us. Look what he says. There was a time when the sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar. The sea of faith? Read your sidebar real quickly and write down in your notes, what is he talking about, the sea of faith? And more particularly, what is he saying that Schaeff, as he lost his job at the shoe factory, also lost? His capacity to do what? Sea of faith means what? Any ideas? What about it? What's he saying? Once England had the capacity to deeply believe in something. Religion meant something. But now, keep reading, I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind. Whoa! What's Arnold saying is wrong with the world of Schaefer and his lost job, the time of the Victorian period. What's wrong with people? They can no longer, what? Believe. They no longer have trust. They no longer have faith. They are skeptical, full of doubting, uncertainty. Hey girlfriend, it's beautiful outside, come over to the window. Well, with the exception of that wretched sound. Kind of reminds me of what Sophocles said a long time ago. Every time he heard the ocean, he thought about human life as nothing more than misery. Do you remember back in the time when all of us could believe stuff, but now nobody believes anything anymore? You can kind of start to get the sense. This is not a love poem. This is Matthew Arnold speaking directly to English people and saying, something has gone wrong. We have missed something. No longer can we believe anymore. I'll often ask students who've been raised in a religious kind of upbringing, I'll ask them this question. Do you believe in it as strongly as your parents do? Or what about your grandparents? Or how about your great-great-grandparents? There seems to be a lessening of capacity to believe. Final stanza. The most disturbing word picture that some of you will ever see. Take a look at it. Love, let us be true to one another. Note the irony. There's no truth in the world, but let's be true to one another. For the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new. The world seems to be an amazing place, but really, look at all the stuff that's missing. It really hath neither joy. I think we know what that means. No love. I think we know what that means. No light. Does that mean we don't have any fluorescent lighting? No. What does that mean? No light means what? No goodness is a good way to think of it. Yeah, nothing good anymore. Keep reading. No certitude. What does that mean? To be certain means what? If you're certain, you're sure, right? No certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And what are we like? We are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies, enemy clash by night. Now, I've been trying to help students understand this line for years. You can drop your pens and look at me. How about this? A word picture to finish my lecture. Mr. Smith comes on to the announcements and sends everybody down to the gym. We've got a major performance. Everybody go. And we all get in there. There's buzz. And all of a sudden, Mr. Smith steps up and he says, I want all the freshmen on the floor. On one end, I want all the girls. On the other end, I want all the guys. I've got $1,000 for each person in the freshman class who wins at our contest. And all the seniors are like, whoa, wait, wrong. Answer. How come we... Smith says, this is a freshman gig. I'm going to blow a whistle, and we're going to have a group of freshmen running across the gym floor from one side to the other. Guys on one side, girls on the other. Whichever group gets to the other side of the wall first, every one of them gets $1,000 cash. I'm ready to give it to them. Ready, set, go. Imagine it in your mind's eye. Man, they're running hard, aren't they? Run. 2 steps before the two groups meet, running at full speed. Smith turns out all the lights. I mean, all the lights, including the exit sign lights, so that it is completely dark in that gym. You don't see it. You can only hear it. That's the word picture. That's the word picture Arnold gives at the end of this poem of what the human condition is now like. 2 armies fighting on a dark plain, but they can't see anything. Jot down as you finish, what kind of mood does this poem end with? Happy? Sad? Some might say depressing versus uplifting. Note the complicated last stanza. Hey, girlfriend, let's be true to one another, even though there's no truth in the world. Even though there's no hope in the world. This poem, Dover Beach, starts to become a working metaphor of what it means to enter, soon, the 20th century. A century of great uncertainty. And oh yeah, I think a century maybe 1 or 2 of you are born in, right? At the very end. Thank you.